Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day you've got, and wherever you are, welcome. This is FreeThought Hour, and my guest tonight is an interesting guy. He's an ex-JW, which is quite an achievement in itself, and he knows a bit about apologetics, which again that's a fund of knowledge to get involved in. And here he is. He's called Scott Williamson. Hi, Scott.
Hello. Doing wonderful. How you doing today, John?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure. Now, one of the first things that we do in these shows, Scott, is ask the guest to say a bit about themselves. So how did you come through this interesting, daring, bold journey that you've done to get to be the person that you are today?
Right. So it's not unlike a lot of people, but unlike a lot of people though, I managed to get out of that situation, and that situation being part of Jehovah's Witnesses, which is a very fundamentalist kind of church or organization, religious organization. Back when I started with them, I was probably in my 20s, like early 20s, 20 years old, 21. They came knocking at my door. This is like a weird age where I think, in my own theory, is that a lot of young people start trying to figure things out for themselves about the world. Some people drop out of religion or drop into religion around this kind of age group, it seems like to me, from everyone I talked to. But I was one of them. That's what happened. I was got involved, was very, very zealous. I turned into a really zealous Jehovah's Witness, got baptized, became a ministerial servant, door-to-door Bible studies, you name it, helping try to encourage other brothers and sisters in the congregation to maintain the faith and be strong and things of that nature. And what happened, what kind of led me out of it, was just by being exposed to an atheist. I used to work with an atheist, and we used to have these discussions, and I always used to challenge him. He used to challenge me, and we used to go at it just about every day, but in a very nice, positive way. He was very patient with me, very cordial about it, and he just asked me certain questions that I realized I could not answer those questions. And being that I couldn't answer those questions, it kind of just made me feel uncomfortable, because I'm like, look, I'm out here trying to convert other people into my beliefs, and yet I can't even defend my beliefs to some degree, at least with this person. So it got me thinking. I started reading, looking at philosophy, looking at epistemology, like how do I come to know the things that I think I believe in. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't feel very confident to go and try to convert people. I felt guilty about it. So I stepped down, I relinquished my title, and then just left the congregation altogether, left Jehovah's Witnesses. And at that point, I went through the phase of being like a really angry sort of atheist, because I'm like, hey, wasted all this time.
Yeah, absolutely. My theory is that those people who have escaped from a religion do feel like, as you say, you've wasted all that time. So you've got a grievance. But you've said such a lot there and raised so many points that I'd like to comment on. First of all, you said that you were in your 20s. So that's unusual, because a lot of people are inducted in religion very young, before they're capable of making an informed choice, you could argue. And that's a policy that faiths seem to have adopted. I mean, even the Jesuits, they had a saying, didn't they, the extreme Roman Catholics, that if you give me a boy of the age of 7, I'll show you the man, as they reckoned that they could manipulate somebody who starts that young. But so it's unusual for you to have, as you say, though, that is a period of life when one hasn't really become a fully fledged person. You're still sort of casting about to find out what you're going to do, who you are even. And so it's understandable that you would get inducted at that age. But you also said by a door knocker. Now, I don't know about in America, but in this country, when the JWs come round knocking on the doors, everybody runs away. They don't open the door.
Mm-hmm.
It's very unusual.
It's same here. Same here.
Yeah. I'm unusual in that I invite them in and then I engage them in a sort of Socratic conversation, asking them why they believe what they believe. Anyway,
That's
you
right.
also said that you became I don't know what term you used, a higher up in the congregation. You had a title. What was that title?
That was a ministerial servant. So there's 2 levels. You become a ministerial servant, which is, I guess, the equivalent of a deacon, say in an Protestant church, you might say. And then you have the next level up, which is an elder, which is like the shepherd of the congregation. So I was at that point of ministerial servant with my eye on becoming an elder.
Really?
At that point, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you were involved, weren't you? You were keen to progress up the hierarchy. So
that's right.
You were definitely a member of that faith. But then you met this guy, this atheist at work, and he managed to talk you into dropping it. That's incredible in itself. Tell us more about that.
That was I never would have thought that was even possible at the time. I was so involved in trying to bring other people into my religion that the last thing I was going to think is anybody could actually convince me to leave my religion. I loved my religion. I loved Jehovah God, and we considered our religion the truth. That's what we used to call it in short, the truth. I would never leave the truth. And but it's very powerful when you know the exact sort of questions to ask, and you know how to point things out that your interlocutor can maybe agree in. If you can find some commonalities, you can actually build on that. And the one thing about it that gave us that commonality was the fact that I was exposed to a lot of different religions. By going door to door, I was challenging people every weekend about their faith, like whether they're Hindu, Catholic, a different denomination of Christianity. I was challenging them, so I understood people's sincerity in religion.
And you met the possibility that there were other truths.
Right.
Interesting. So you were sort of exposed to a version of street epistemology, not in the street, but at work, where you were asked some pertinent questions which you couldn't answer. And how did that, you said it made you feel, well, tell us again, what
so it would be, first of all, just understanding what atheism was, because that was one of the big problems I had, even having the discussion with the person to begin with. I'm like, well, you're an atheist. I mean, that's just absurd. I mean, you don't believe in God. I mean, how could that be possible? Like, who does that? And he was like, well, and you know, my question was, how do you even prove that there's no God? Like, how does that work? Because I can't understand how you can be so confident there is no God when you can just look at the trees and see that all this stuff came from somewhere, and that's the best explanation in my mind. And then he kind of broke it down and said, look, atheism isn't about always saying there is no God and that we know there is no God, but an atheist is one who simply doesn't believe in God. So we don't believe. So for him personally, he says, my view is that I don't believe there is a God and I don't believe there is no God. I just have no beliefs on it one way or the other. until you can show me evidence one way or the other to help me. And so far, no one can do that. So that was the first step.
Mm-hmm. Very few people are what you might call fundamentalist atheists. It's not possible to eliminate the possibility of there being a creator deity, in my view, at least. I know there are a few people who firmly hold that the absence of evidence for a God equals almost certainty that there isn't one. But, you know, a lot of people who would class themselves as non-believers are not that certain. They don't have that absoluteness about them.
Right. That certainty, you know, fallibilism, the fact that we can be wrong about certain things is a really good, you know, thought to have, or premise to kind of move forward with. In science, especially, evidence is tentative until proven otherwise. This seems to make the most sense. This seems to explain how things work for now. But you know, it's self-correcting. So if there's other evidence that comes along to contradict it, maybe you can build on that knowledge, or maybe you can wipe it out altogether. Like, there was a time in science when, you know, people thought that whether the earth was flat, or whether we have the, you know, the ether, you know, light travels through the ether, and there was mathematics to back it up. It made sense. Science consensus was all about it. And then, you know, people built on that, and Einstein came along, and all of a sudden it was just thrown out altogether. And we have a new thing. So science works in that way, that it's not so dogmatic.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people think that science is certain, and it's the very opposite. It's just the best model that we've got today.
Yeah.
So Gordon here, who's in Canada, he is like you. He's an escapee from his faith, and he went through an angry period, and I think he's quite militant too, aggressive, and it's at having been gullible over half a century. So that's what makes you cross, you guys.
That's right. And you get mad mainly at yourself, I think, too, because you've allowed, you feel like, you know, there's some part of you that was gullible enough to fall for it and waste your life and waste your time and things like that nature. But what helped me come to peace with it was to just realize, you know what, I can't go back in time and change it, number one. And it's just reality. This is who I was at the time. This was my limitations. And thank goodness that I was even able to recognize it and then do something about it, you know. So
look on the
a lot of things to be grateful for. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Regret doesn't get you anywhere, does it?
No, doesn't help.
So you have gone from being someone who was persuaded by street epistemology, that technique, to somebody who now has his own show based on that. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, as I said, I was an angry atheist. I didn't know how to have conversations with other family members and friends about religion without it really just devolving into an argument or shutting down the communication altogether. And then, you know, eventually, I'd say around 2014, I discovered street epistemologists, you know, people on YouTube that would talk to religious people. And I always had the mindset of, you know, we can debate and all of that stuff is great, but at the end of the day, what are we really trying to solve here? What's going on? You're not changing anyone's mind. In fact, we're setting it up as this is my opponent in the conversation. So instead of being opponents, let's see if we can be partners in a conversation and talk about these things. And so I discovered Anthony Magnabosco, the person that I interviewed last night on my channel, which is Reed Nice Wonder. And I even did.
People visit your channel on YouTube. There it is, that banner there.
Perfect. Yep. Exploring Epistemology. And so what we want to do with that channel is I have a goal, and this is kind of getting back to your question, like what is the point, or what is it that we want to do with the channel. And the goal of my show here is really just to encourage healthy skepticism in as many people as I can. So like the reason for this particular goal, it's all connected to the fact that the society that you, my children, your children live in are made up of people who hold certain values and beliefs, right? And these values and beliefs are reflected in the society and culture we live in. So if these values and beliefs are in fact informed by people who make these societies, then it just seems that these beliefs and values should be arrived at using the most effective tools and methods possible to arrive at them, right? So that's the show. That's what it's all about. That's the contribution of the show, and it's my end goal, at least,
Excellent. What a worthy goal that is, too. You're absolutely right. We should be using the best forms of evidence, not specifically beliefs, because beliefs can be false, as you and Gordon, for example, have found out and demonstrated very well. So what we need to do is base our decision-making processes, that's our government and our education service, on proper evidence. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I'm on
I was
the
just
same
going to
side.
say, yeah, I know you are, and we talk about that every Sunday on the Free Thought Radio Hour too, and it affects everything from our political beliefs to our worldview beliefs, philosophical, religious, you name it. But beyond just the thing it is that we believe, because I mean, let's face it, everyone's different. People are going to believe differently. We live in a viewed society, right? But I think that what's more important than that is the method we come to understand things and believe things, because you'll be surprised. Some people don't even know why. If pressed, they can't give you an answer as to why they believe things.
Yeah.
And that's really weird,
Yeah. They were taught it as youngsters, and they've assumed from then on that it's correct. So it's understandable, I suppose, because you trust your elders, your parents, that's probably why the Jehovah's Witness faith has adopted the title elder. Because
that's right.
That's a position of trust, isn't it? So Gordon agrees here. He used to walk away reassuring God that he still believed in him, but he's never had to do that for science. And that's what we're saying, isn't it? Because science has got evidence. It's not a belief. You can point to it and you can say, there you are. That's why the answer is this. You don't have to believe it or disbelieve it. It's just observable.
Yes. The one great thing I like about science is, it's a method for distinguishing between the imaginary and reality. So if you have a belief, the one thing that I always ask people is, how do you distinguish between imagination and reality? Like, what is your method for that? Look, the great thing about science is, I mean, let's take a look. Religion says we have faith in this, we have beliefs in that, but they have no way of connecting it to anything out here in reality, concrete reality. Science, on the other hand, it may start off imaginary. I mean, let's face it. Imagination is the mother of hypothesis. So a good hypothesis requires a lot of imagination, but science takes that extra step and tries to connect that imaginary hypothesis to something real that we can actually observe and predict and count on. Religion doesn't do that.
I did a previous show a few weeks ago on that very subject with my guest then was a lovely guy called Frank Lovell, who's he's down in Kentucky. And so we had an hour, you can see it, it's in the archive. And we were talking about how to discover, because as you just said, believing is in here. Having faith is inside people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only really the beginning of discovering something. You think up, or you use your imagination, you think up this useful hypothesis based on what we know, but then religion goes no further. And science takes the next step. It says, let's test it. Let's check. Let's set up some sort of investigation to see whether our thoughts match observations of reality. And that's the big difference. And that's what so many believers don't understand.
They don't. And it's so easy, though, to conflate the two things, because here's the other thing. We have something in science called the placebo effect. And so your beliefs can actually make you feel better.
Yes.
Like if you take a sugar pill, it can actually make you feel better. Or and so a religious person, like I spoke to a minister not long ago, and he says, well, but religion does have prediction power like science. We have our own science. If you believe and you pray for something, God will make your sorrows go away. You'll feel better. You'll have the inner strength, inner power within you, make your life quality so much better. Science doesn't do that, but religion, this is where we have our own science, so to speak. But what they're doing there is they're just taking one imaginary thing to predict another imaginary thing. And the two, when the two meet, they call it like, a proof of their religion. Well, the thing about that is every religion that can do this. Every religion, a person who I can speak to a Hindu and they can say, look, I pray to Vishnu and these things happen. A Christian can pray to Jesus and these things happen. A Muslim, same way. And we can go all the way down the line 6,000 times. How do you explain that? Is there some other commonality? Or is it possible that any one of these people can be mistaken? And of course, they'll say, of course, they're praying to the wrong God. So of course they're mistaken. And then the question is, well, why can't you be mistaken? Why are you special?
Yes, indeed. Yes. Well, you're right. There is a placebo effect, and the brain is connected with the body in a mysterious way. And you're right too about homeopathy, the sugar pill, which can make you feel miraculously better. And of course, yes, prayer, it's a bit like a doctor's bedside manner. It's a comforting, sort of encouraging sort of thing to do or to be part of. But which would you prefer? I mean, if you'd just been struck with COVID virus, for example, would you prefer a vaccine or, some proper treatment, or a respirator to help you breathe when you're dying? Or would you be happy to accept the, 2% chance that the placebo effect might kick in strong enough?
Exactly. I know for me, it would be science and the doctors and the experts, the consensus of experts is what I would appeal to. But of course, with some people, unfortunately, with Jehovah's Witnesses, they're going to opt with not taking the blood transfusion, for example. They're going to opt for death over making Jehovah sad. It makes Jehovah sad when people save their life against his rules. That makes Jehovah sad, and they don't. That's more important than the life of their children or what have you. So it's a very dangerous way of thinking, I think, when people start down that road.
Definitely, yes. Children die because of their parents' choices to deprive them of life-saving opportunities. We've, in this country, this is the UK, we've prosecuted parents who have prevented their children from receiving life-saving blood transfusions, and their children have died, and we've taken them to court for, I don't know what the charge was, but it's been a matter of criminality in this country.
Yeah, that's a great thing. That's to me, it's just so twisted. Children are innocent. Children aren't developed. They don't have their own,
Yeah.
the tools necessary to make their own decisions, and they depend on their parents to guide them towards the best way. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of parents are just, under the sway of brainwashing. And so they are going to brainwash their kids, or they're going to force their kids
Mm.
to, to live an unhealthy life or something like this, or be abused in many cases. The same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses. There's a huge problem of child abuse that goes on, just like with the Catholic Church, that gets swept under the rug. And I was a part of that at one point. When I left, I saw an elder who did this to a young child. I didn't see it with my own eyes, but I was in on the information where a lady wanted an elder to babysit her, her daughter while she went to work, and the elder sexually abused her daughter. And then it got investigated, and we were all there. But the lady was disfellowship because she was so nerve-wracked that she started smoking. She used to be a smoker, and she started smoking cigarettes, and they found out about that, disfellowshipped her for smoking cigarettes, but kept the elder, who sexually molested it, because she wasn't allowed to go to the police or anything. That's another thing that makes Jehovah sad, is because if you go to the authorities, what you're doing is you're making Jehovah look bad to the public. And so that makes Jehovah sad, and you don't want to do that. And so that's why that was kind of overruled. So she ended up disfellowshipped, and it was just, for me, it was especially at that time of doubting, by talking to, and it just all came together and clicked for me. I was like, this is just crazy. I can't be a part of this.
I'm out. Yeah.
I'm out,
Well, disfellowship is a peculiarly Jehovah Witness thing, isn't it? The other religions have it, but they don't call it that, do they? I mean, it's apostasy in Islam, and but the whole idea is to keep you locked in, isn't it? Not to allow you a chance to leave.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that. It's basically scripturally, in the first century, they had the early church, the way, and the way had the way. This was the way to live, the way to pray, the way to do things. And anyone who did not follow the way were disfellowship. You can read all about it in the letters of Paul, where he's like, remove the wickedness from among you. So this was a spiritual death.
Sorry.
And yeah, no problem.
I'll just put that on mute, shouldn't I?
There you go. Yeah, and so this was considered a spiritual death. And so in the first century, they would remove people from the way. And so Jehovah's Witnesses were, wanted to continue in that tradition, that we're going to remove people that don't follow our ways. And that's what they do. Now, disfellowship people can come back if they earn their way back into the religion.
Yeah, I don't know if that being the case in Islam. I think you're more likely to get stoned to death than allowed back.
Yep.
So how did that happen to you? I mean, what's been the effect of leaving that religion on you personally?
Well, I left, but I didn't officially resign. I just kind of just stopped going to the meetings and disappeared, left the state and just forgot all about it,
So you moved a few miles away.
Yeah. I moved, and I went all the way to Europe, in fact. So
right.
Exactly. So I lived in Germany for a while, not long after that, leaving that church group, and started life all over again. But for me, it was just leaving, leaving that religion, just cold turkey. I didn't want to resign. I was really, At the time, I think I was a little bit shy to do that. It's a weird mental process that
Mm,
you go through. When you leave, you feel guilty for leaving, even if you have good reasons and you tell
yes,
yourself,
yeah,
there's an elder who said, look, I heard him on a call-in show on a podcast, and an elder who was an active Jehovah Witness said,
yeah,
look, I am watching, other elders rape children. Like I'm privy to this information and I feel terrible about it. Like I feel guilty because I know rape is wrong. According even to our own beliefs, it's wrong. I
yeah.
want to leave and I just need someone to help me find my way out. And he was talking to an ex Jehovah Witness on the podcast. He was
Mm,
saying, yeah, you just need to try to leave and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, yeah, it's like, I know it's wrong and I leave and then I get to the point where I'm going to leave and then I feel like, man, I shouldn't. I'm making Jehovah
oh,
sad doing this. But then I'm
gosh.
like, wait a minute, why would he be sad when,
Mm,
it doesn't make sense. So it's a
no,
weird mind game you go through.
it is definitely. Well, there are organizations for people like him, aren't there? I mean, there's
Hmm.
Recovering from Religion, which is a great
Yep.
organization worldwide now. And there's the Clergy Project, which helps people like him, an elder who was high up in the church, not just an ordinary member of the congregation. So there are organizations that can help out.
Yes. In fact, the host of my show, he has the Borg, she has the Borg Skeptic channel. Her name is
Oh, yeah.
Katie. And
Mhm.
Katie is an ex Jehovah Witness too. And Katie actually, she talks to the good people there at Recovering from Religion
Mhm.
for herself because she's dealt with a lot of sexual abuse at the hands of
Mhm.
elders. So it's
Mhm.
a, it's a it's a big thing. It's a big problem, and it's not really talked about as much as I think it should be. I don't think a
Mhm.
lot of people realize just how widespread it is within Jehovah's Witnesses. But yeah, it's crazy.
And it shouldn't be so hard to escape. I mean, you shouldn't have to go to Germany just to get out of a nonsense religion.
Right. That's right. It's just and I think it's emotional abuse because you have to understand too, it's just not a place to go to learn about God and stuff like that. You're actually forming family there.
Yes.
So you've got
Yeah.
relationships of people that you
Mm.
care about deeply. But
Yes.
when it comes down to it, when you leave Jehovah, then you
Mm.
leave them. They're going to cut you out. And then that's just very abusive because you're no longer allowed to talk to your friends. You're no longer allowed to even talk to
Yeah.
your family. You're not allowed to
Yeah.
talk to your family. It's
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've had a couple of Mormons on in the recent past, and it's the same for them, of course. And these things are like cults, aren't they? You've got to
hmm
worship the group and the leader, or
hmm
else you're simply ostracized. You're not part of
hmm
us. You're an enemy.
hmm
It's a Religion is divisive.
very.
It doesn't unify humanity. It sets one group against another. We're
hmm
right. No, we're right. Argue, argue.
hmm hmm
Mm,
Very divisive. You can't, this is why street epistemology is so important, I think, because the nature of religion is so divisive that it's hard to even communicate with
yeah.
believers.
Mhm.
And if you can find out a way to make it less about the belief per se and about the epistemology, if you can focus on that, maybe that's a way to talk about these things without
Yeah.
having that problem of communication,
Yeah.
and at the same time address the exact things you're really trying to address, which I
Mm,
think is just how do you justify your
mm.
beliefs? That's really
Exactly.
what it comes down to. Like we can
Yeah.
sit here and say, oh, it's crazy to believe in a virgin birth or whatever, and we can all rationalize that and say it's just crazy to believe it. But you got to understand, for these people, it's just as crazy, if not more. Of course, it's more crazy to believe that, as they think, we came from monkeys or something like that. Like they think that
Yeah.
we're the ones that are
Yes.
believing crazy stuff. So let's
Yes.
not talk about the beliefs. Let's get away from that. We all know
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
these things sound crazy to each other. Let's talk
So
about, yeah.
epistemology is just a fancy word for asking people why they think, why they believe what they believe. What's the reasoning behind
Mm-hmm.
their
That's
position?
correct.
And
That's
that
right.
is what people don't normally question. Next week, I've got another person who's escaped from another weird religion. She's a Pentecostalist, ex pastor of Pentecostal church. And of course, that's the one with all the speaking in tongues and collapsing in a heap business. So she'll be interesting to talk to. And all you've got to do is come to this show next week, same time, same place, and listen to, what's her name? Catherine Roberts. Yeah. She'll have an interesting story to tell too.
Yeah, I know about that.
Do you? Yeah. How come you got to be so well informed about apologetics? Is that because you were doing it from the side of GJWs when you were door knocking and stuff? You were fending off the questions that people were posing to you.
Yeah, you hear a lot going door to door and encountering, I'll go to a minister's house or a father's house that's a Catholic, father, or you'll meet all kinds of people from every walk of life and belief in church or religion. And so you hear all their apologetics, you hear all of their, reasonings, and you have your own. We have a book that we study called Reasoning from the Scriptures. And so you learn these certain apologetics for, how do you defend this view and that view and this view, and you just learn those sort of techniques. And then, but I think for the most part, I learned apologetics once I became an atheist. I started getting really involved in watching debates between, like, say, a William Lane Craig and a Christopher Hitchens, and those sort of things I used to find very interesting. And so I would watch these sort of conversations and listen to the apologetic and then hear the counter apologetics. And then I would go and research myself, like, that Christian said the cosmological argument for God. What is that really like? I would really learn more about that. What is this teleological argument all about? Like, and kind of like take a look at it. And so I learned it inside and out, and then, could figure out, this is problematic. These are all garbage arguments, basically. But and I found out that if you want to talk to someone who's so well versed in the apologetic, how do you attack that apologetic? Like, where do you go with it? Like, what's the thing? So I got into that, and I started debating people in person and online and things like that.
Counter apologetics.
That's right. Which requires a knowledge of apologetics, of course. You have to know what you're countering,
Absolutely. Yeah. But you have another side to you, Scott. You're a musician.
That's right.
This is your major hobby. Yeah?
Yes, it is. I right now I create electronic music, and I promote it and distribute it. And I work with Grammy award-winning songwriters right now, like with Mike Greenlee, who's a Grammy Award songwriter. Audrey Martels is another Grammy songwriter that I work with. Deborah Magone is a performer that I work with, and we're actually promoting some of our musical projects to the Grammy nomination board in October. So that's one thing that I do. I've been, involved in music my whole life. My family's, really big into music. My brother used to be the lead singer for a group called Atlanta Rhythm Section, which was a really big band back in the 70s and 80s. My sister, she's going on tour in Europe, actually, starting in October for her albums and stuff like that. So yeah, the music stuff just runs in the family, and I find it really fun. And I try to make songs that are positive and humanistic, with a message that's really positive and caters to that free thought and secular humanism.
I'm going to play one of those in a minute. Was your sister and brother, were they in the Jehovah's Witness?
No. So I became a Jehovah's Witness once I left the nest, so to speak. And and so they came to my house, and that's how I discovered them. My family is not really religious per se, maybe in label, like culturally or socially we're Christians or whatever, but not really church going or anything like that. We didn't grow up in that sort of strict religious background. Luckily. So it was really odd that I would gravitate towards you, and my family didn't understand that. Like, what?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you a little anecdote about me now, because I used to be in a band many, many years ago. And the first drummer that we had, he was a very good drummer. He had huge kit with about, 8 tom-toms all the way around, the whole octave. And
Yep.
Unfortunately, he became a JW, and apparently, according to him, you, as a JW, you have to tithe. You have to give part of your earnings to the church, 10% or whatever it was, and you're not allowed to have any sort of untaxed, unaudited earnings. And at the time, we were going out playing in pubs and places and getting, a backhander for bringing the customers in
That's right.
to fill the beer to. I mean, they could have given us beer, but they used to give us a tenner or something. It's a long time ago when that was a reasonable amount of money. But because he wasn't, in his faith, allowed to receive that money, he had to declare it, pay tax on it, and then pay a tithe on it. According to him, he had to leave. And we had to get a new drummer.
Wow. Yeah. I could see that. Render unto Caesar what is due to Caesar. That's the thing. And
that's it, is it? Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses are very meticulous. They're the kind of religion that they are is very legalistic. So they're very, you can't celebrate birthdays, Christmas. No. Those are pagan-based holidays. So to not make Jehovah sad, you don't want to do anything that the pagans would do, which would be celebrate birthdays or Christmas, any holidays. You don't join the army because that's being part of the world. And Jesus says, I am no part of the world, just as you are no part of the world. So we are not to be engaging in politics. Don't engage in the world wars, the wars of the world. Don't engage in the police, because you might have to hurt someone or shoot someone, and you wouldn't want to do that. A lot of legalistic sort of things, like you're talking about, like make sure you pay your taxes anytime you earn money. Make sure you render unto Caesar, because God is watching. Jehovah's watching you. That's the whole thing. And I suffered from a condition out of that whole thing called scrupulosity, and I had to go see a psychologist about that, because what happens is, in that case, is when these sort of messages, you start meditating and inculcating this sort of guilt in your life, you worry about the thoughts that you have. Maybe I see a really pretty young lady and have a bad thought, then that's scary, because I'm making Jehovah sad, and he's going to get mad with me and kill me for it. That's
not a bad thought. That's biology.
Yeah, that's biology. But Jesus says it's better that you rip your eye out than to lust over a woman, right? Very legalistic. So they're going to take everything literally, and they're going to take everything, as it said in the book.
Well, that's the way to the human race becoming extinct.
Yeah. Right. Well, I have a theory about that. I think that the reason religions really promote away from being attracted to other women, and they're really big on family. And I think because when you have strong families, you have strong churches, because you have
Yeah.
more people and they just want to build numbers, and that's what it's all about. So Jehovah's Witnesses were all about, you can't live with you can't live with a woman or a man, you've got to be married,
Yeah.
dating, you can't kiss on dates or anything like that. You've got to be very,
Yeah.
very, what they call, conduct yourself decently, So yeah, so they're all about promoting strong families. It's a family values type of
Right.
thing there,
Yeah. Pretty much everything else is taboo.
Oh yeah, you can't cuss.
Oh, right.
As Paul says, do not let a rotten word come from your mouth. And he was referring to profanity. Let not a profane word come out of your mouth. And so they take that very seriously. If you start cussing or they hear you cuss, you could get disfellowship.
Wow. Yeah. It's a big effect on people's lifestyle, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So let me play this number that you've linked me to. A screen share. Where are we? Here. I think this one. Yeah. Okay. I think this has got the vocalist that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
We could change the world. We could change the world. I know what my life was meant to be. I see, so much more we all could be. It's clear if we didn't live in fear, we could make a difference here. We could make a difference here. I do believe everyone agrees that it's time to change the world with some positivity. I believe we can do what no one else has ever done. That can show us the truth. It's brighter than the sun. Just keep the faith. We can make this one just better place. We can make this one a better place. In front of us, so much possibility. Hands up to us. Everything began for you and me. I believe we can do what no one else has ever done. That can show us the truth. It's brighter than the sun. Just keep the faith. We can make this one just a better place. We can make this one a better place.
Oh, it was just going for a break. I faded it just before the break.
They'll have to go buy the album.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, I think it's a great number, and
Thank
like you say, it's got a message, an uplifting, positive message, which
That's right.
contrasts with the horrible concept, the impression that many believers have about you and I, atheists.
Good point.
They tend to think that we are immoral, purposeless, God-hating baby eaters.
So true.
It's just a joke.
There's certain religions that teach that we actually, you and me, actually do believe in God, but we're suppressing it because we
Yes,
want to sin. That's really what
yes,
it's about. We're trying to fool people to believe that,
yeah,
we don't really believe, but in fact, oh, they believe. They know God exists.
yeah,
They're working for the devil.
yes, yeah. I know. Yeah. Well, I think it's Penn. But what's his name? Penn Gillette of Penn and Teller. The magicians. He
Hmm.
says. He says, "I rape and murder all I want as an
Hmm.
atheist, which is none."
Which is none, exactly. Yep.
Yes.
That was one of the better quotes that I like, out there, because
Yes.
it really drives home the point that, morality doesn't come from religion. It
No.
doesn't come from authority. Morality comes from you. From
Yes.
It would have no meaning if it didn't. If it came from some authority,
Yeah.
then there's nothing special about it. You're just a robot. You're just doing what you're told, and there's no value in that, is there? You
And
know?
you probably wouldn't obey it either, would you? I mean, it's a rare person who will submit to control by another agent.
Hmm.
Most people, I mean, if you've ever had children or taught children, you'll know that most people want to argue with somebody who tries to impose his will on them.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, uh, expecting everybody to succumb to the Almighty dropping his morals onto us, that's wishful thinking, I believe.
Absolutely. It never dawns on them that maybe I want to live in a world without rape and murder because I don't want to be these things happening to me or my children.
Exactly.
I want to live in a world that creates that environment of less suffering and less needless crime and suffering and things of that nature. So obviously, I'm going to want to promote that, and
Yeah.
it comes naturally. I think there is some sort of objective fact about nature that
Mm.
says, we want to support, you know, our tribe, that we want to support our
Yeah.
species.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a drive to be empathetic. Maybe that's an objective sort of grounding into morality on some level, possibly. So the objective moral, or that objective moral argument can apply equally to us. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like a lot of people say, well, how can atheists really have morality when they can't, when it's subjective? They think it's all subjective. That means it's according to their imagination, or it's according to their opinion, or what that makes them feel good. And so it has no value. Whereas we have a real strong anchor. We have God, we have this really strong foundation for morality
Mm.
rooted in something real. Well, if you wanted, you could argue that so do we. It's called nature. The nature of reality is that we like to be empathetic, and this is why
Yes.
we're all sharing in this, moral progress.
Indeed. Yeah. I would say that it's a complex adaptation that's evolved because
Hmm.
we are a very successful species. There's
Hmm.
I forget the latest figure, 7.9 billion of us.
Billion, right?
Yeah. And you don't get to be as successful as that without having some considerable attributes. And we don't have, the biggest teeth or the longest claws, and we can't fly away if we want to be a predator or to escape being eaten. So the way we've managed to get to be so successful is by cooperating,
Hmm.
by working together. If
It's really strange it's really weird if you think about it. Like, we don't have these big fangs and big claws, and we're not all that strong. And, if you put us out in the jungle for a day or two, we might not make it, probably won't make it. Whereas any other animal probably would thrive just fine. I mean, we would probably get beaten by a simple house cat. If you think about it, a simple house cat could probably take us out if it wanted to. So we're not all that, special in as far as that goes, but we do have an imagination. We're able to perceive. We have this time and space concept in our brain where we can make plans and reflect on the past and learn from it and progress and do technology and do math and language. And we have superpowers,
And that's all come about because we help each other. And if you do a bit of raping or murdering or even pillaging or theft, you lose that cooperation. That person is not going to be your helper anymore.
Not at all. And if you think about it, they say that a lot of religious people like to point out that, but our nature is so bad. I mean, you look at the news, you look at the bad in the world, the evil in the world, but in actuality, it's the other way around. I see more cooperation and there's more empathy among people. That's why when you hear bad news, it's shocking. It wouldn't be shocking if it was as they paint it out to be. It'd be shocking that we even have empathy, according to them. So I don't know.
Yeah, the numbers are on our side by a big margin.
Big time.
Yeah. You wouldn't eliminate badness. You wouldn't eliminate unsocial behavior, antisocial behavior, because there's variation. Our children are not exact clones of us. There's variation, and some of those variants will not be socially well behaved. So there's going to be a small number that will need. That's why we have a criminal justice system, because of this tiny number of non-cooperative people. Absolutely.
Correct. Yeah, nature weeds them out naturally.
We're definitely on the same page there, Scott. Anyway,
absolutely.
Believe it or not, we've nearly done a whole hour, and I don't like to stretch my my tolerance with my guests. So I'm going to gradually draw the show to a close. I'm going to thank our small but elite audience for watching us, and encourage them to like and share and set the notifications and such like, so that they can come and see the show again and visit the archive. Because if you go to YouTube FreeThought Productions, you'll be able to see lots of shows like this. I've had all sorts of guests from all sorts of levels of society. I've had professors, I've had doctors, I've had experts in pretty much everything you can name. And I've had Scott Williamson, who is an ex-JW expert in apologetics. And he's been fantastic. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation as usual.
Great. Yeah, you're a great person to talk to. So next week, July the 3rd, we're into July already, it's Catherine Roberts, ex-Pentecostalist pastor. Imagine that. She'll be fun to speak to. Come and watch us then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you again.